In the late 1970s, Iran looked like a country moving steadily toward the future. Western leaders praised it as a pillar of stability in the Middle East. Its ruler was armed by the United States, advised by Europe, and presented as proof that modernization under Western guidance could succeed in a deeply traditional society. And then, almost suddenly, that image collapsed. Millions poured into the streets. A powerful monarch fled the country. Clerics replaced generals. Iran didn't just change its government, it openly challenged the political, cultural, and strategic dominance of the West. How did one of America's closest allies turn into its most enduring adversary? Why did a revolution rooted in religion defeat a heavily armed modern state? And how did this single event reshape the Middle East and global politics for decades to come? In this video, we are going to answer all these questions, so let's start. To understand the Iranian Revolution, we need to begin long before 1979 in a country shaped by foreign intervention. In 1953, Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, moved to nationalize the country's oil industry, which had been dominated by British interests. The decision was wildly popular inside Iran, but it threatened Western economic and strategic control. In response, the United States and Britain orchestrated a covert coup that removed Mossadegh and restored full power to the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. From that moment on, the Shah's rule was inseparable from Western backing. He presented himself as a modernizer, but many Iranians saw him as a ruler imposed and protected by foreign powers. Over the next 2 decades, the Shah launched sweeping reforms known as the White Revolution. Land was redistributed, women gained new rights, education expanded, and Iran's economy grew rapidly thanks to oil revenues. On the surface, Iran looked like a success story, but beneath that progress lay deep contradictions. Wealth was concentrated among elites tied to the royal court. Traditional rural communities were disrupted without being fully integrated into the new economy. Religious leaders saw their influence eroded, while political opposition was crushed by the Shah's secret police, Savak, which became infamous for surveillance, torture, and repression. Modernization moved fast, but political participation did not. This created a society filled with tension. Many Iranians were not opposed to progress itself, but to the way it was imposed from above and aligned with Western interests. The Shah's close relationship with the United States, his purchase of massive amounts of Western weapons, and his cultural westernization policies fueled the perception that Iran's identity was being sacrificed. Mosques, universities, bazaars, and even sections of the middle class became spaces of quiet resistance. At the center of this growing opposition was an unlikely figure, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. A religious scholar with little interest in compromise, Khomeini openly criticized the Shah in the early 1960s, condemning him as corrupt, tyrannical, and submissive to foreign powers. For this, Khomeini was arrested and eventually exiled, first to Turkey, then Iraq, and finally France. But exile did not silence him. Instead, his speeches were recorded, copied, and distributed across Iran on cassette tapes, turning him into a symbol of resistance. What made Khomeini's message powerful was that it fused religion with politics in a way that resonated deeply. He framed the Shah not just as an unjust ruler, but morally illegitimate. He argued that true sovereignty belonged not to kings or foreign-backed elites, but to God and the people who followed divine law. This message appealed not only to clerics, but also to students, workers, and intellectuals who saw in it a language of dignity and independence. By the late 1970s, Iran was sitting on a fault line. Economic growth slowed, inflation rose, and corruption became more visible. In 1978, protests erupted after a newspaper attacked Khomeini. The regime responded with force, killing demonstrators. Instead of restoring order, the violence escalated resistance. Each crackdown produced larger funerals, which became new protests, creating a cycle the state could no longer control. The turning point came in September 1978 when security forces opened fire on protesters in Tehran's Jalal Square, killing dozens. The event shattered any remaining legitimacy the Shah had. Strikes spread across key industries, including oil, crippling the economy. By early 1979, the country was effectively ungovernable. Facing mounting pressure and lacking full confidence in his own military, the Shah left Iran, officially for medical treatment, but in reality in exile. When Khomeini returned to Iran in February 1979, millions greeted him. Within days, the old regime collapsed. The monarchy was abolished, and Iran was declared an Islamic Republic following a national referendum. But the revolution didn't simply replace one ruler with another, it transformed the entire political system. Power shifted from the royal court to a new structure centered on religious authority, with Khomeini as supreme leader. This new state openly rejected Western political models. It framed liberal democracy as morally empty and Western influence as a form of domination. The revolution's anti-Western identity became unmistakable later that year when Iranian students seized the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, taking American diplomats hostage. The crisis lasted 444 days and permanently damaged U.S.-Iran relations. For Washington, Iran became a symbol of revolutionary defiance. For Tehran, the hostage crisis reinforced the idea that standing up to the West was both possible and necessary. The consequences of the Iranian Revolution spread far beyond Iran's borders. It inspired Islamist movements across the Middle East, alarming secular governments and monarchies alike. It reshaped regional power balances and contributed to the outbreak of the Iran-Iraq War in 1980, as neighboring regimes feared the export of revolutionary ideology. Globally, it marked a rare moment when a U.S.-backed government was overthrown not by a rival superpower, but by mass mobilization rooted in ideology and identity. Decades later, the Iranian Revolution still shapes global politics. Iran's tense relationship with the West, its regional influence, and its political system all trace back to 1979. The revolution showed that modernization without legitimacy can provoke backlash, that foreign intervention leaves long shadows, and that ideology can mobilize societies in ways military power cannot control. Iran didn't just defy the West, it redefined how resistance itself could look in the modern world.